out some kind of signal on Earth that we're going to this distant galaxy on a spaceship. And the way time works in space is that by the time we get there, either we're arriving at a much later time, we're arriving in the future, because the way light travels in space is that, again, I'm no astronomer, but from what I read here and there, it's that it's not exactly instantaneous, obviously. So by the time it reaches, I mean, let's say a signal sent out to a distant planet, it could be 1,000, 3,000, 400,000 years, depending on how far away the planet is. But tachyons make it interesting, where I know the alien talk is a little overused, so I won't try to use aliens as an example too much. But could you imagine that essentially an extraterrestrial civilization harnessed the power of tachyon travel, and this is how they're using it, but not to the degree that we're imagining that they're using it. They're plopping themselves in a ship and then zipping around like the Jetsons over here. It's more like they're using it to project a consciousness, which is the second part of the equation of the conversation, which is the subspace soul, so to speak. Could we use tachyons to project consciousness or across a vast amount of space? Well, what do you think? Do you think that is a plausible scenario? Do you think we could ever get to that point?
Yeah, you are seriously in the right place, my friend. And I hadn't actually considered that thought in particular, because of course it probably would have came to me as we go. But you just brought it up straight out of the gate here. I think and so here's the weird thing about consciousness is that it is currently sort of without definition, without a full and comprehensive definition. So what we do know about the quantum world and entanglement, and again, this whole tachyon concept of faster than light, here's another fascinating tidbit about tachyons, by the way. I was reading about this as well. And they assume that if there's a speed of light speed limit, a universal speed limit, okay, is the speed of light, meaning that everything that has mass cannot ever achieve the speed of light. It has to be less than. But what they say about tachyons in particular is that they're stuck in the other state, which is always faster than light because they're without mass. Like you said, they are theoretical, no proof they actually exist, and some have even described the tachyons as moving backward in time, like you said. And so the crazy part here is, if we're talking about that, and it does move at such like kind of I don't know, like we talk about consciousness in terms of remote viewing or near-death experiences or things like this. To answer your question in, let's say, a little more brief way, I think so. Because why not, right? I mean, if we're talking about faster than light communication and it's just my words to you, why not my entire consciousness? If we're talking about this in terms of, communication, exotic communication, I guess. I don't know. I think it's a great thing. What's your thought on that?
Regarding communication?
Yeah, just you brought it up. Could we communicate directly with our consciousness? Just whatever your idea was on that.
Well, essentially, you would still have to find a way to. I wouldn't say capture. Capture is an incorrect term for it. I would just say harness the consciousness in a way. The closest thing that we're actually doing to that, and it isn't even human, is artificial intelligence. Kind of stay with me for a moment while I kind of dive into this here, because
sure.
Essentially what artificial intelligence is that it's consciousness in cyberspace. So imagine, if you will, a person gets stripped down to their nuts and bolts of their DNA. So at the biological level, they're just stripped down, and everything that you know about them gets zipped into a computer. Now, what AI is essentially it's a mock-up. It's a copycat of what a human should be. Obviously, we're not at a point where AI is quote unquote sentient. I mean, I know there's some stuff in the news about Google. I don't want to dive into that because that's a whole nother ball game there. But if AI reaches a point of complete sentience and there's singularity and it's an actual conscious, I would say, of a being, essentially, That's as close as maybe we can get to human beings going the tachyon route. If we can do something like that, then it's possible. Then I believe, like, the possibilities would be endless. Could you imagine if the Earth in the, God forbid, not in the near future, but maybe down the road, we have this huge global cataclysm, and by that time, technology has kind of ramped up beyond our wildest dreams, and there's a way to transport our consciousness to a safer, more secure part of the galaxy, or even the universe, and we could exist in maybe another vessel, or maybe within a hybridization of a biological and technological entity. It sounds bizarre, but it's essentially, we're doing it as almost like the paternalistic God figure to AI here on our planet. We're trying to do that with them. It's how do we use AI to implement certain things in our life to make things easier, whether it's chores, to work, to school. I mean, we're trying to use AI. AI's everywhere. If you go back in time 50 years and you would tell somebody that you could talk to your phone and ask them where the nearest Burger King is at, or, you know, how fast you can get from point A to point B, they look at you like you're nuts. But that's essentially, that technology is moving fast. I mean, we are in a state in our time where technology is moving 3-4 times faster than it's been the last 20, 30 years, and it's going to keep going. So, to answer your question about the way tachyons are maybe harnessed for future endeavors, I mean, that would be a plausible way. It's like we kind of relate how we would try to do it for us to how we're doing it for AI now. And then, I mean, again, AI is a whole nother conversation where do the ethics begin and where does the Frankensteining start? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's well said. All of that, you're way ahead of my maybe juice tonight. I'm just getting it kicked in. I'm just getting the caffeine hitting my brain. So the thing is too, regarding all of this, is you're correct in that technology is sort of moving faster than we can even have definitions for it, and that becomes a terrifying thing, because we're talking in terms of not just definitions of what technology may become, let's say, a decade from now, but we're also talking about maybe legislating this stuff, and like Congress and all the rest of that is like dinosaurs in terms of like old stuff anyway. But like, we're talking about technology that in 10 years could change the world. And I don't know, man. May you live in interesting times. That's for damn sure, because here we are. What else you got for us regarding the subspace ghosts, my friend?
Beyond that, I mean, I wouldn't say, when you say ghosts, are you referring to the conscious or actual, just like spiritual like beings? Is that what you're referring to when you're saying ghosts?
Yeah, I think both, because again, like I said, the definition of consciousness is kind of sloppy at this point. But yeah, so let's say the way I was thinking about it when I was doing up the show idea was what happens when when somebody passes away here on Earth. They say that sometimes souls stick and they become, let's say, attached to something, an area, a space, an object, things like this, right? But what happens if somebody passes away in space? Because we have this huge circular motion thing going on with the galactic arms and all the rest of this. So do you persist haunting space? I don't know. That's what I was thinking of in terms of, so not just the consciousness and the soul, but then this tachyonic, whatever the hell is actually happening in subspace. Is that where the ghost would go? I don't know. Just throwing out the idea of WTF is happening out there, really. Just a concept. I don't really know. There's no answer here, but just curious.
No. It's a fair question, because you figure when we die, when our physical body says, this is it, I'm kicking the can, I'm done. Or something, God forbid, terrible happens to somebody and they pass away. But energy, we always expound energy, whether we're conscious of it or not. And when we die, we expend a great amount of energy, and essentially we leave an imprint, an energetic imprint on where we die. I mean, there have been theories about spiritual happenings, whether they're literally an energy imprint where somebody has passed, and it's just a replaying loop of the event which took their life, or something that they did while they were alive. But to answer I mean, essentially the same rules would apply then, because we would be expelling all this energy into space. Where, I mean, where our soul, so to speak, would have to go somewhere. And if you're in this great, if you're in the pantheon of among all the stars, where you have an indescribable amount of energy being expelled for a variety of reasons, and death is just one of them. I could imagine that our souls could maybe traverse among these planes, like an energy highway, if that makes sense. It's like we would, let's say, you were traveling from star to star, and you died in some space crash or whatever, and then I guess your energy has to go somewhere. So I would assume that it's like an intergalactic highway, so to speak. I mean, I feel like there are no limits. You could kind of go to and fro, because, I mean, that's how space is. It's literally just energy everywhere. Whether or not we can become so quote unquote space ghosts, I mean, again, that kind of plays into what you believe. I mean, faith would dictate that the soul persists, and you can there is an afterlife. So maybe there's an afterlife in space. I mean, maybe we're just existing on interdimensional planes in places we can't even see or fathom. I mean, that's really it. I mean, that's what I think anyway.
Yeah, perfect. You are on the wavelength tonight, my friend, smashing it right out of the gate. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for the phone call. Thanks for listening. Always a pleasure. Nick in California, please call back, man. Jay in the chat said, smashing the icebreaker. Appreciate it very much.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I'm sorry. I didn't want to take up too much time either, but yeah, thanks for all you're doing, Mike. Keep it up. I'm going to enjoy the show tonight.
Appreciate it, my man. Thank you so much for the call. That's Nick in California, smashing the icebreaker, the first call of the night, right out of the gate. Look, hey, this is the thing. It's a concept. It's a new concept. And I like how we brought consciousness into the idea of subspace. And of course, now subspace is basically, I guess you would describe it as a dimensional sort of, highway, like Nick put it. That's a very good way to put this, in that if we have sort of a separation of matter, actual matter, like people and planets and rocks and things, actual matter in the universe, but then you have this secondary class of things, or even, let's say, the primary class in this case, because it would be stuck, the tachyons would be stuck moving faster than the speed of light, and even in some cases they say backward in time. So there's like this huge sort of WTF is actually going on, and not just like we talk about quantum entanglement and things like this in the quantum world, spooky action at a distance, all that stuff. Now we add in this idea of the tachyon, this massless thing that, again, is basically the basis of many sci-fi, let's say, tropes regarding, faster than light travel. Like they do it in Star Trek, they do it in Stargate, they do it in so many sci-fi shows where they're like, we're getting a subspace communication, and they're doing that thing because, of course, you can't, if you have exotic propulsion and you're moving at the speed of light or even faster, then how are you going to communicate with vessels all over the galaxy? Well, enter subspace, enter the tachyon. And so, of course, it got me thinking in terms of, again, the story TamBam started this idea last night by just popping in the chat saying, I'm learning about tachyons. So I was like, yeah, that sounds sweet. Let's learn about some tachyons together. But then it got me thinking in terms of what does it mean? And a good, fantastic first call there from Nick, because the idea is, well, what is a ghost? We're talking about subspace souls. We're talking about, I called it the warp ghost because it made sense, the warp ghost. But what does happen? So I was looking at, there are approximately 25 people or so. There's something like this. I'll get you the actual number in a sec here, of people that have actually died in space, cosmonauts and things like this, right? And there's actually a conspiracy, by the way, called the Lost Cosmonaut conspiracy. And we'll get to that, meaning that they think that a whole bunch more people actually did die in space than they've actually let on. And so the question became to me, all right, so if somebody passes away in space, which again is going to become a thing, right? Not just because people do what they do, they expire, but also we're going to be becoming more and more a spacefaring civilization. It's it's happening, right? And we're talking about Mars within the decade and all the rest of this stuff. And so may you live in interesting times indeed, because here we are. But it got me thinking in terms of what would happen instead of like an attachment here on Earth, because it's, good old terra firma. When the soul passes and we get these hauntings or whatnot, the space poltergeist, as it's been sort of tongue-in-cheek referred to by the naysayers of souls and ghosts and whatnot. And again, I'm no arbiter of truth there. You decide on that stuff. But the idea is that the ghosts sometimes remain attached to a space or, like I said, a place or an object or something like this, right? In some cases. And so it got me thinking in terms of what happens if you pass away in space? What happens to that spirit? What happens to the soul itself? And it got me thinking in terms of this tachyon and maybe this sort of a subdimensional highway of energy or whatever the hell's really going on. I have no idea. I'm just postulating, just cosmic musings and just doing the troubled minds thing. So fantastic call from Nick getting us kicked off. We're taking your phone calls tonight as we discuss the idea of tachyons, the warp ghost, subspace souls. What happens to the soul when we pass away in space? It's coming, hot and heavy. People are going to be dying on Mars pretty soon, and I don't mean that in a catastrophic way. I mean it in humans just have expiration dates. What are your thoughts? 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. Don't go anywhere. More tachyons, subspace souls, and your calls when we return. Be right back. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and we are streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, DLive, and Twitter, and we are broadcasting live on the Fringe FM. Tonight, we're taking your phone calls as we discuss the space ghost. Yeah. Well, in basic terms, what happens when a person expires in space? We've heard of a sort of soul-bound objects or spaces or areas or haunted houses or things like this on Earth. But what happens in space? Again, considering, of course, that we believe in the soul existing as a thing, right? Again, as you know, we do what's called drinking the maybe juice on this show, which means you got to presuppose a couple things to kind of have these conversations. So what do you think happens? And so, of course, this was inspired by TamBam last night with the tachyons and learning about that. And so it got me thinking in terms of, okay, space. What about space? What about this sort of dimensional superhighway of energy as described by Nick there, which was a fantastic call to kick us off. And what about the idea of subspace souls? Again, the subspace is, again, the idea of something moving faster than light using these tachyons. Again, even regarding time travel. I don't know. It seems like science fiction, but they say that this stuff is actually real. This is a scientific concept. In theory, of course, they don't have proof of this stuff yet, but it got me into digging into tachyons and neutrinos and massless things, and it's a crazy world we live in. It's a crazy galaxy, and that's just the way it is. So looking to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think happens to, let's say, the human soul in space? If there's nothing to tether to, do you think maybe it finds its way back home, for instance, like Robert described, through some sort of black hole experience, getting spit out the other end of the white hole, which may be heaven or not, that sort of thing, which was a great comment left by Robert on the Rockfin, or by the Robert on Rockfin. And I don't know. So that's what's on my mind tonight. I think, why not? Why not space ghosts? Hey, and why not call it the warp ghost? 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. Love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think happens to a soul in space? And not only that, is it possible that the soul, the consciousness are linked, as Nick described? And does that mean that we can communicate through subspace with our consciousness? Oddly enough, I found this article just real fast. This is from the Simons Foundation. I almost said Simpsons. And the headline is this: Brain areas may use subspace communication to talk to one another. And well, it doesn't mean exactly the same thing we're talking about tachyons, but it is describing this thing where the brain is able to kind of spooky communicate with each other and filter ideas from different regions of the brain itself. So things get complicated, don't they? The more you look into this stuff, the more you go, 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. Let's go to Matt in Colorado. What's up, my friend? You are on Troubled Minds. Go right ahead.
Alpha Bravo Charlie, how do you copy?
Loud and clear. What's going on?
All right.
Space
Let's
Ghost.
go.
Give us Space Ghost, my friend.
I know. I want to get to that, but I want to do just briefly 90 seconds of just talking about tachyons and a little bit of the math involved there and stuff.
Shoot it.
Just so people understand the physics of it and why they call them imaginary particles. And so just basic, if people can picture your city, and if you had a central point of your city and you do a cross there, okay, that cross, that's our Cartesian plane in mathematics. So from that center, if you went like 2 miles to the right and then 2 miles up, we would call that 2, 2. If you went 2 miles to the right and 2 miles down, we'd call that 2, -2. If you went to the left, right, 3 miles, we'd call that -3. And if you went up 4 miles, that'd be 4. Well, if you go left and down, we would call that like, let's say you went -2.7 left, okay, and then you went down, that'd be -2.7, okay. Now, the problem in mathematics is we have a thing called the square root. So the square root of 4, that's what two numbers multiplied by each other would be 4. And the answer is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Well, the problem is if we go to the left and down and we get to this coordinate, -2.7, -2.7, okay, that can create a vector from the center point. That's a distance, okay? That's a leg, that's the hypotenuse of your triangle. Well, if you try and take the square root of that, we arrive at a problem. Because what two numbers multiplied by each other, would give you that distance? Well, you're in the negative region of the plane. So any negative number times a negative number is a positive number, right? So there's no answer. This is in mathematics what we call the whole realm of imaginary numbers. Okay, and we have ways that we deal with them. We can resolve them and we represent them with the letter I. But so what's the question is, what's the square root of -4? Well, there's no answer because no two numbers can be -4. So I do this to draw out a point. There are 2 points really. One is this is why the physicists say that tachyons are imaginary particles, because the equation that gives the amount of energy for a tachyon particle on the bottom of the equation, on the right-hand side at the bottom in the denominator, is a square root, okay? And that involves the mass, the relative mass, and the velocity. And when you try and take that square root, it results in an imaginary number. So it's like that quadrant of the Cartesian plane I was just saying, where you live on the southwest corner of town, where math can't solve it. So that's why physicists refer to it as an imaginary particle. Now, beyond that, it's also a theoretical particle. So it hasn't been proven to exist, and we likely can't. One, they go faster than the speed of light, and second, they can never go slower than the speed of light, because mathematically speaking, that would require an infinite amount of energy for them to actually decelerate, which is, wrap your brain around that if you can. But let's also remember the Higgs boson particle. That was a theoretical particle until it wasn't, right? Going back to the CERN, and we proved it to be true. So in talking about these tachyons, that's what we're talking about. Math gets a little complicated. They're theoretical, but there's also, they could exist, and they do actively use what they call tachyon and go to other dimensions and realms, kind of into that subspace area. And so if there's any truth to any of that, then certainly there would be what we might call ghosts in space and other beings out there in these subspace realms, or that we can progress to them. And so, that goes to the other law of physics of energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So if your consciousness, your being, your soul, it obviously must have energy. Well, according to physics, it can't be destroyed. So when you pass away, that energy's got to go somewhere, and Nick was talking about that. So where's it going to go? Does it depend on, personally, my take on it is it depends on the evolution of your soul and where's most appropriate for you to go next. I think it has more to do with that than the region in space. Say if you were out there on a ship and you die there, you're going to go to the nearest star. Because I think of things a little more multidimensional and spiritually speaking, but that's just how I think about things.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're saying a good solid maybe. I like that. I can deal with that.
Yeah, good solid maybe on that.
Right on.
And yeah, and last night I said, at my close of my comments, don't drink too much maybe juice. And I didn't want that to be misinterpreted. Your show and the maybe juice is great. I consider it like mental gymnastics, and it gets us to stretch our minds and open our minds. And I consider that extremely psychologically healthy. And, all I was meaning to say was you don't want to open your mind so much that your brain falls out. Or
amen to that. Amen to that. It was not taken that way. No problem at all. When you talk about when you talk maybe juice, that's a compliment. So thank you for that.
Right.
We got a jet, man. I got some stuff to get to. 702-957-1037. Matt here, a good friend of mine, good friend of the show. He's got a book called Escape the Matrix and Explore Reality: A Guide to Radical Transformation and Empowerment. Check it out. Links in the description. There's still some coupon codes down there for a free copy of that book. So free PDF. Check it out. I appreciate the phone call, Matt. A pleasure. I'm glad you could give us some of the actual math behind this and make a little more sense, because imaginary things are difficult in concept. So thank you for squaring some of that up. You're the best, bro. And okay, cool. There you go. All right, I appreciate the phone call. Looking to hear from you guys. We're talking about the warp ghost, and I'm calling it the warp ghost because why not? Tachyons, the imaginary particles, and of course, subspace souls. And all that means is this. What happens to a human soul when they pass in space? All right. And that's the thing. We're talking about energy transference. We're talking about the idea of consciousness as a soul. And is there this sort of parallel dimension that's defined as this subspace? Again, the sci-fi tropes with subspace. It is pretty interesting. But I was going down, doing the rabbit hole stuff per usual. And there's just a few articles here that I want to point out that kind of, we just went straight to the calls. But let's just back up just a smidge. And this is from Science Alert. And it was May 24th of 2022, and the question is on the article, what would happen if someone moved at twice the speed of light? And of course, what they get into is not just the theory of relativity by Einstein, the universal speed limit. They get into tachyons, okay? And of course, the universal speed limit applies to anything with what we might call ordinary mass. And they say there are, however, hypothetical particles called tachyons with a special kind of mass called imaginary mass. And they say there is no evidence tachyons exist, but according to relativity, their possible existence can't be ruled out. If they do exist, tachyons must always be traveling faster than the speed of light. Just as something with ordinary mass can't be accelerated past the speed of light, tachyons can't be slowed down to below the speed of light. Some physicists believe that if tachyons do exist, they would constantly be traveling backwards in time. This is why tachyons are associated with time travel in many science fiction books and movies, and there are ideas that we might someday harness tachyons to build a time machine. But of course, for now, that remains a distant dream. And that's what got me going on this whole idea, of subspace. Now, subspace, again, is basically it's an alternate dimension. It's this sort of locked in, I don't know. Like, how would you describe it? Is it the upside down? Is it the downside up, as described in the chat there by, I believe that was, who said that? Somebody in the chat said that, and it's I think it was Tim, and I think that's the thing, right? That the downside up. Maybe, we talk about Stranger Things, and I always joke about living in the upside down on this show and discussing those sorts of things. But what's really happening with this sort of subspace tachyon? I don't know, and that's what we're talking about. So in terms of that. Not just with that going on, but then again, what happens when somebody passes away in space? What happens to that energy, the transference of energy? And I wanted to get to this, so I started looking up death in space, right? And there's some basic stuff where they talk about death and what happens to the body, and decomposition and things like this, and that's fascinating. That's fun. I mean, not dying in space, not death itself, but the science of what happens to the body. But there's more. There's a lot of this. Like I said, 20-ish people have died in space, verified. And there's also this idea that a lot more than that has happened. I got you, James. Copy that. Meaning that, check this out. So the lost cosmonauts, or phantom cosmonauts, this is straight from Wikipedia, are subjects of a conspiracy theory, alleging that some Soviet cosmonauts went to outer space, but their existence has never been publicly acknowledged by either the Soviet or Russian space authorities. Proponents of the lost cosmonauts theory argue that the Soviet Union attempted to launch human space flights before Yuri Gagarin's first space flight, and that cosmonauts on board died in those attempts. Soviet military pilot Vladimir Ilyushin, probably didn't say that right, was alleged to have landed off course and been held by the Chinese government. The government of the Soviet Union supposedly suppressed this information to prevent bad publicity during the height of the Cold War. And so it got me thinking, right? I was like, okay, so I've never heard of this. I did know that it had been rumored that there were a whole bunch more space expedition type stuff where a lot of cosmonauts did pass away, all right? But I didn't realize it was a conspiracy. Of course, everything you look up is, it's a conspiracy. But so then it got me thinking in terms, okay, tachyons, subspace. What happened to those people that actually died in space? Because we're talking about, let's say, the first human generation where this is going to start happening. And in those terms, like I said, we're going to start seeing this more and more. And Matt has a great point. Matt in California in the chat said, what happens to an alien if they pass away on Earth? The plot thickens. I don't know, and I think that's why this is fun to think about, fun to talk about. I don't know. And do you think space can be haunted? Space itself haunted. Tachyons, subspace souls passing away in space. The phantom cosmonaut or the lost cosmonaut theory. I don't know, man. I don't know. Hey, man. I'm just talking here, just thinking here. But yeah, it gets weird. It gets fascinating. We're going to get into, because of course, thinking in terms of this type of stuff, and let's say haunting in space, and I'm calling this the warp ghost because it sounded fun. And there's a Warhammer 40,000 clan called the Warp Ghost, by the way. This is where I got that from, to give credit where credit is due. And it got me thinking in terms of course, quantum entanglement, that spooky action at a distance, like I said when we first opened the show, in terms of being able to communicate through subspace. Now, if subspace is one of those things where these particles, these tachyons, are moving faster than the speed of light, then what about this spooky action at a distance where we have quantum entanglement between two particles at any distance whatsoever, right? So I was like, okay, this is weird. This is, Einstein himself called it spooky. And so spooky is a fine word, and it got me thinking in terms of ghosts. Now, why not space ghost? Space ghost! Why not, right? Hey, that's what we're doing tonight. So we're going to get to the Hitchhiker Effect, all right? Meaning that we're still talking about what happens to subspace souls, what happens when a, let's say, human person passes away in space, what happens to their soul. But we're also going to get to some of this entanglement stuff and the idea that there's this, you guys have heard this from George Knapp and the Skinwalker Ranch stuff, the idea that there's something called a Hitchhiker Effect, meaning that not just with Skinwalker Ranch, but other paranormal phenomena, there is a sort of attachment. And again, back to the attachment, right? So if a spirit attaches itself to things or spaces or places on Earth, then would that happen in space? And if we're talking space and tachyons, subspace and entanglement, and the rest of this, what happens when you're talking about the Hitchhiker Effect? Are they related? Does this seem to kind of come together in woo-woo land? Or am I making a stretch? And you guys tell me. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm thinking about. Because why the hell not? It's Troubled Minds after all, and it is Thursday. And Space Ghost Coast to Coast. I see you there, Fletch, in Discord. How you doing, buddy? And yes, Space Ghost. Yeah, I never really liked the show, Space Ghost. I thought it was a little campy, but that doesn't mean it's not good. I probably missed some stuff. So there you go. So what are your thoughts? As we do this, we get down to the top of the hour. Love to hear what you think. Do you think it's possible that, or what do you think happens to the soul, the human soul, when they pass in space? And then do you think it's possible that this is somehow related to quantum entanglement, the tachyon, the subspace, the entire thing? And then maybe what about this spooky Hitchhiker Effect? We'll get into that in the next hour. So you tell me. I don't know. Is it related? Is it not? Is this too far off the beaten path? Is it too novel? Is it not novel enough? I don't know. It's all fine. I don't really care, meaning that all I care is about a good thought process, some mental gymnastics, as Matt said, and a good conversation. So love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you know about the warp ghost? Calling it the warp ghost. Tachyons, subspace souls. What do you think happens when a human passes away in space? Does their soul pass on? Does it get left there floating, waiting for something to come pick it up so it can become bound to something again, attached, or otherwise? 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. Don't go anywhere. More warp ghosts, tachyons, and subspace souls, and of course, the Hitchhiker Effect when we return. Be right back.
You're listening to Troubled Minds. Join us as we discuss an upside-down world that nobody seems to notice.
We are talking about the alien abduction phenomenon. Aliens.
The aliens are looking through your eyes and they're accessing your optic nerve. I'm doing fantastic. And through that optic nerve, they're transferring to your brain. People are going random images as they traverse neurons in the brain.
So all right. So maybe,
and they also feel them planting or receiving memories or ideas or images.
Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness.
good evening and welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and hello to all of you who may also have troubled minds. What's going on, guys? It is Thursday night, which is one of the nights we get together and talk about all the things we're not allowed to talk about. We do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific. What are those things that we're not allowed to talk about? Aliens, conspiracy, the paranormal, the government, academia, the 24-hour news cycle, propaganda, and the general feeling that we live in the upside down. We're taking your phone calls tonight like every other night. And you can reach the show at 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. We'll put you on the show. It's as simple as that. We, of course, are streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, DLive, and Twitter, and we're broadcasting live on the Fringe FM. The topic tonight is, oh, you got it, it's a space ghost. I'm calling it the warp ghost. Tachyons, subspace souls, right? So we do know that in terms of, let's say, the woo train, right? A little too much woo for you, or not enough, I don't know. Never enough, or it's too much, I don't know. You can't please everybody. But we're hopping on the woo train, the galactic woo train tonight, because what happens to a soul when they pass in space? Meaning this, when a person passes in space. Here on Earth, souls have been known, poltergeists, hauntings, things like this, that where souls will attach and not move on, whatever that means. We don't know if exactly what the reason for that is. There's a whole lot of theories regarding that. But of course, haunted dolls, haunted objects, haunted places, things like this. But what happens again? So we have this again, galactic spinning wheel, right? And it's we're on one of the tentacles of this galactic spinning wheel. And if you pass away in space and a thing spins and leaves the soul there, what do you attach to? Is it like a Terminal Arts just said in the chat that it sounds like some bad sci-fi movie? It starts with a sort of a soul floating in space and attaches to some sort of meteorite and then lands on an alien planet and starts haunting, well, the alien planet. So I don't know. Can souls attach to satellites or meteors, or again, do they find their way home some other way through maybe subspace, or this idea of tachyons, which again are imaginary particles, or, well, mathematically sound, but still imaginary because they're massless, and they say they even persist in something like another dimension, and that would be sort of the layman's definition of what subspace is. So what do you think? The questions tonight are exactly this. What do you believe regarding the human soul? And if it does sometimes get left behind, what would that mean in space? You know what I mean? Where does it go? Does it float? Does it sort of merge into the general consciousness of the universe, or does it just haunt space? Is space haunted? We always talk about the internet being haunted. Well, what about space being haunted? Matt's got a good one in the chat. He says, if you're in a car going the speed of light, what happens when you turn the headlights on? I think catastrophic vacuum decay of the entire universe. 702-957-1037. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Can space be haunted? Let's go to James in Michigan. Salcedo Paranormal. What's up, my friend? You're on Troubled Minds. How are you?
I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, my man. What is going on? This is. I figured this might be down your alley a little bit. Space ghosts? Go right ahead. What are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is, this just is reminding me in a way of, and I don't remember the name of the flight or anything like that, but I remember hearing this story about a plane that was involved, had technical problems and was involved in a crash. But then parts of it were used on other planes. And after they were installed, people would see, I believe it was the pilot and co-pilot, anyway, two people from that plane that crashed, there were sightings of those people in or near those planes. I believe it was for sure in them. And I'm just wondering now, if that can happen with planes, and again, I'm just saying if that can happen with airplanes, then how do we know that can't happen with any other vehicle that is sent out there?
Like a satellite, right? Like a satellite or something.
Satellite, shuttles, anything like that, where, unfortunately things happen, bad accidents, technical problems, and let's say there's something that ends up causing the deaths of the crew. Then could they still, their consciousness or soul, however you want to call it, still be attached to that object that is wherever it is, whether it keeps on floating through space, whether it lands somewhere, whether it is retrieved by people from this planet, I just wonder if that's a possibility. It seems like if one is the case, then the other could be a case.
Yeah, I think so. And it does, it's fascinating in terms of where, I don't know. I mean, concepts. It's like we talk about, creation, the idea of creation, and, you're a writer, and James here's written several books, and by the way, links in the description, check it out. We talk about often on this show where not just inspiration comes from, but where the ideas for original stories. Is it all influence? Is everything regurgitated? Does it sort of come from this universal source somewhere where all stories sort of develop, and including like mythological that type of stuff? Like, I don't know, like there's that. But then when we talk about in terms of not just sort of the inspirational source and the source of information and things like this and storytelling passed down, all that stuff, what about the other part of, well, what about the consciousness and the souls and things like this? Where do they come from? And then at some point, where do they go? And, Earth is this tiny little speck in this huge universe, so it's mostly space. So you would think that, like, in terms of like haunting or poltergeist or whatnot and things being attached, Earth is an exception because it's so tiny compared to the vastness of space. So I wonder, right? There's got to be some sort of like something, like some sort of universal rule for how that works, right? I mean, probably complicated, but it seems like that rule was probably in place before the Earth rules were in place for souls and whatnot, right?
Yeah, I always wonder about if you take things, if you go to the ideas about the origin of the universe, and just taking, let's say, the Big Bang, for example, where everything was in this one point. Does that mean all consciousness was also in that one point, along with all of the matter and all of the energy before it exploded?
Yeah, I think it would have to be, right? So that would mean that all of consciousness existed in that singularity of the Big Bang, assuming that's the thing that actually went down. I mean, some
right.
Some of the astrophysicists are now doubting that and changing their ideas. But yeah, I mean, it would have to, right? And so that's an interesting question too. So is our singular consciousness singular at all, or is it just part of like the larger universal scope of that same thing?
Yeah, and the other thing that I heard this phrase a couple of times tonight, and when it gets to a lot of the physics and the science stuff, my brain does not process it very well. But I heard this phrase, a couple of people mentioned the idea of tachyons going back in time. How far back can they go, I wonder? Can they go all the way back to that beginning, whatever that beginning was? And then would that mean that the consciousness, let's say someone does pass away out in space, and then they somehow encounter this energy, or it's already there, however that works, then would that consciousness just ride that energy back to whatever the beginning was?
Ah, interesting. So very much like we talk about the Higgs field, and they say that the Higgs boson, the Higgs field, is what gives energy mass. When energy passes through this Higgs field, it gains mass and becomes mass in the universe, okay? Now, interesting, I wonder if it's a sort of a cosmic recycling process, and like you described, we begin. When it ends, we end up in this subspace dimension with the tachyons pushing us back in time to the beginning at greater than the speed of light. So, well, you snap your fingers and boom, circular. Hey, isn't it weird how some things seem to be cycles? The great cycle, maybe even the greatest cycle. Yeah, great take, James. Great take. What else you got on that?
The only other thing I was thinking is if you look into people's experiences with spirits or even near-death experiences, there is this idea that people experience and also help create their own afterlife depending on their cultural background and beliefs. And I'm just wondering then, if someone does passing away in space, would that necessarily matter? Wouldn't they just go to wherever they think they're going to go? Again, and then that brings up the question, though, of where is that anyway? And now I'm just wondering, is that some version of, or maybe even close?
Some people call it all kinds of things, okay? Because, of course, definitions are hard when you're talking about woo-wooville. But it goes like this, right? So if we have earthbound souls that are trapped here for some reason or another, then what about the idea of this secondary term, which is fascinating to me because it all ties into this idea of entanglement, right? If we can communicate through subspace or even quantum entanglement from like something in our brain to something entangled, let's say even 1 million light years away, there's supposed to be instantaneous communication there, right? So all things would be connected through that entanglement, that spooky action at a distance as described by Einstein. But if you take the next level of that and wonder about those attachments and in the terms of souls in the spiritual world, what kind of entanglement can happen? And what I mean by that is this thing called the Hitchhiker Effect. And I know you guys have heard this. George Knapp talks about it often. They talk about it as a phenomenon that happens as part of Skinwalker Ranch. And again, I know there's a lot of people that the Skinwalker Ranch thing is very, let's say, polarizing. Some people believe, 100% that there's just, it's like a paranormal hotspot and there's UFOs and orbs and all kinds of things hovering around over there and whatnot. And some people are like, no, it's just a big psyop. It's a bunch of BS. And it's just the way it is. It's not, it's marketing. It's not hauntings. It's marketing. So I don't know. Like I said, you decide on that. I'm not here to do that, to tell you what to believe. But I think it is fascinating that, again, since this is a paranormal alien type show, I think it's fascinating to think in terms of if the haunting stuff was real. And so let's say that entanglement, the quantum entanglement from the spiritual realm, is what may be causing what's known as the Hitchhiker Effect. And now what I mean by that is they say if you go to Skinwalker Ranch and have an experience, like an actual sort of haunting or connection with some sort of ethereal being or whatever's going on over there. I don't know. Again, like I said, it kind of presupposes we believe that this stuff is true. All right. But then they say that when you leave the ranch, you take this stuff home with you. It piggybacks on you and things start happening, spooky things in your own house or wherever you go after that. So it made me wonder, like, what the hell's going on with this in terms of, maybe it is sort of a woo-woo entanglement, right? With tachyons and subspace souls and all the rest of this. Why not, eh? Why not? So check this out. This is a fantastic, this is written by what's the guy's name? Just one moment, please. This is very, very long. Oh my goodness gracious! How did I get this? This is not the one I was looking for. All right, one sec. Let me find this. Actually, let's go here. This is from Higgiepopp.com. Let's do this, and then we'll get to the actual piggyback Hitchhiker Effect after the bottom of the hour here. But this is from Higgiepopp.com, and there's a lot of fantastic articles I pulled up to do this show tonight. But the question on this one is: are there ghosts in space? Exactly what I was looking for. I never expected to find an exact article talking about this exact thing. Now listen to this. Ghosts are said to be spirits or energy of the dead. When the body dies, the spirit is left behind. They often haunt places where they lived, where they died, or somewhere with a special meaning to them, like a place they frequently visited. And some say the psychic energy or emotions from the body can be captured and stored in the surroundings and materials like stone, wood, or even the ground. It is said that on the anniversary of the death or when the conditions are right, the materials release their energy and events can replay. But what happens if someone dies in space? There are no buildings for a spirit to cling to. There is no ground. There's not even air that a spirit could attach itself to. There's just space. And you will imagine my surprise when I found this article, because I thought, no way in hell anybody ever talked about space ghosts. But, well, somebody did. And this was actually from March of 2017. So anyway, let's assume a spirit could haunt a fixed point in space. Straight from the article, let's say an astronaut died during a mission halfway to Mars aboard a space shuttle. Within minutes of their death, the point of death would be thousands of miles away from the shuttle. This is because Earth orbits at the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. When a shuttle takes off from Earth, it has the same momentum. It too will orbit the sun at about the same speed. But if the spirit attaches itself to a fixed point in space, then the ghost will remain stationary in space while the shuttle and Earth moves away at about 18 miles per second. The ghost wouldn't be subject to inertia or momentum in the same way as the shuttle is because energy has no mass. It would also not be affected by gravity. To make this even more complicated, the shuttle isn't just moving in relation to the sun, to quote Monty Python. Now the sun and you and me and all the stars that we can see are moving at 1 million miles a day. And the outer spiral arm at 40,000 miles an hour of a galaxy we call the Milky Way. And I thought it was fascinating. So that would be the thing. Like I said, everything's spinning in space. Everything's always in motion, even though, again, fixed to good old terra firma here, we don't really detect the motion of space other than, watching it sort of in the stars at night. But it seems like if you stand in one spot here on Earth, everything seems to be stationary, doesn't it? Well, that's a big illusion. I get the illusion of reality. And so what happens then? That's a hell of a thought. I think maybe James nailed this, and this is what happens when a soul passes in space, because they can't get back home. They're being left behind, unless, of course, they can travel through... subspace. Back in time to the singularity itself to be recycled in the largest cosmic cycle of birth and rebirth. So I don't know. What are your thoughts here? We'll get to the Hitchhiker Effect in the bottom of the hour. I'll peel out this article that I couldn't find, and we'll talk about that. But what are your thoughts here? Again, like I know it's a little bit dense because tachyons and subspace is very sci-fi, but also in terms of let's mix it, because why not? This is Troubled Minds after all. Let's throw it in the blender and hit puree on tachyons, subspace souls, and of course the Hitchhiker Effect, quantum entanglement, and all the rest. So the question becomes, and it continues, persists to be, what do you believe? What happens to a soul when they pass in space? Does it even matter? Or is there some sort of superhighway of energy in a subspace dimension that brings it all back home? Love to hear your thoughts at 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. Don't go anywhere. More about the warp ghost, tachyons, subspace souls, and the Hitchhiker Effect, and your phone calls, and we'll return. One segment left, guys. If you want to call, you got to get in now. Be right back. Don't go anywhere. More Troubled Minds on the way. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange, and we are streaming on Rockfin, YouTube, DLive, and Twitter, and we are broadcasting live on the Fringe FM. Tonight, we're taking your phone calls as we discuss the idea of the subspace soul. What the hell does that mean? The warp ghost. James described it. I think he pinned this down. What about this? If a human perishes in space and their soul is trapped, meaning it's in space, it's energy, maybe it does actually end up in the tachyon highway in subspace, traveling back in time faster than the speed of light all the way to the Big Bang singularity. What do you think about that? Love to hear your thoughts at 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. Also click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show. It's as easy as that. Now, Now, let's get into this real quick. I see you there, Vicky. I'm going to get to Vicky in just a sec on the phone. But I want to talk about this real fast, this Hitchhiker Effect. And speaking in terms of quantum entanglement, right? We have this idea of not just entanglement of particles or maybe even consciousness in terms of communication. Like when Nick called in to start the show, he was saying, well, do you think you could communicate direct consciousness through this idea of the tachyon sort of a subspace highway, right? What energy highway, whatever this happens to be. And I think that the answer is probably yes in some case, right? So it got me thinking in terms of not just that phone call, but previously the idea of this Hitchhiker Effect. Again, talked about often by George Knapp and the Skinwalker Ranch folks, that there's something that attaches to them and follows them home. Now, this is from an actual scientificexplorer.org, and this is written by Colm Kelleher. You guys probably know of him from doing some science work on the woo-woo stuff, and he does take a lot of heat for this. But here we go. Listen to this. For several years following July 2009 and subsequent trips to the ranch. An individual by the name of Axelrod, his wife and teenage children were subjected to nightmarish dogmen appearing in their backyard to blue, red, yellow, and white orbs routinely floating around the home and in the yard, all the way to black shadow people standing over their beds when they awoke, and to a relentless barrage of loud, unexplained footsteps walking up and down the stairs of their house. The Axelrod teenagers endured some very scary episodes in their bedrooms, and Paul, the younger teenager, claims to have been attacked by blue and red orbs in his bedroom on the night of February 7th, 2011. Now, this is Skinwalker Ranch, and this is the type of stuff that goes on over there. Now, there's this thing that called the Hitchhiker Effect, and I'm thinking in terms of that cosmic soul, that whatever, right? We're talking about woo-woo stuff, but then also quantum entanglement. Is this the Hitchhiker Effect? Is it some sort of, let's say, quantum level attachment that is not woo-woo, but actual science? We just haven't been able to pin it down yet. Just throwing out theories here. And this is, again, straight from the same article. The Hitchhiker Effect is the feeling of bringing something home and the subsequent person-to-person transmission of paranormal phenomena, some of which can last for years. And they did name this the Hitchhiker Effect. In an April 2022 interview, Skinwalker Ranch research team member Dr. Jim Segala addressed the hitchhiker phenomenon, quote, "Over the past 5 years, it has been our experience that when people interact with the phenomena and do not treat the phenomena with respect, that's when we see a higher rate of the hitchhiker syndrome. Symptoms experienced by people range from acute neurological injuries to chronic blood disease. Those who have told us that they brought home a souvenir often have some type of illness as well as family members. The data, again, comes from years of tracking and collecting data from those who have come forward." And like I said, I don't know. I've never been there. A lot of people say this is just BS. But what do you think? Do you think it has something to do with this maybe subspace souls, the tachyons, or entanglement, or something else entirely? Maybe you think it's just a hogwash, and that's fine by me. We're just having a conversation here. 702-957-1037. And we're talking about the warp ghost, meaning what happens to a human soul if, let's say, an astronaut dies in space. All right, let's go to, looks like Vicky in Illinois. Vicky, you're on Troubled Minds. How are you tonight? Go right ahead.
Good. Hi, Mike.
Good evening.
You have a good subject.
Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Give us your take. Go ahead.
I agree with James about, the person who dies, pretty much wherever he goes kind of back to wherever he's from. I don't know about aliens, but I would imagine if they have a soul, it probably goes back to wherever they're from, wherever they're loved, and people are remembering them. Same with us.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Because it's like my brother, different place, a different city than where I was at the time, but he would come back and he would visit me in my dreams, which was really weird. And anyhow, that's some of the supernatural things I deal with. He was telling me different things to tell his wife, which was right on cue at the time. But when he had passed, and he even had come and told me about things I need to be aware of, and also his wife and family needs to be aware of, which is kind of different. But I think even when somebody dies in or wherever they're at, their spirit comes back to where they're loved.
Okay.
Whether it is outer or wherever.
That makes a lot of sense. In that, like Robert said, he said he doesn't see what the difference would be, where whether you passed away on Earth or in space. And I just thought it was an interesting concept. Again, I don't know like you know me, I'm not trying to give out any answers here. It's just more of a let's explore this, let's think about it, let's talk about it. And the tachyon stuff and like sort of faster than the speed of light just caught my attention. So I thought, why not? Let's merge a couple ideas together and we'll talk about it. But I do love how you're describing that we do go back to that love, wherever that's from, wherever we came from, wherever people remember us or miss us, is where that soul would return. And that does make a lot of sense.
And then it's like, if somebody isn't loved at all or even remembered, I don't know where they go. If nobody knows them or remembers them or anything, because our spirit pretty much stays alive by those of us who are remembering others, until they're no longer remembered.
Yeah, so then I wonder maybe if that's what is actually keeping them here spiritually, and then once that memory fades of who they are, who they were, then maybe they do jump into that recycle stream, like James was postulating. I like it. It seems to track, doesn't it?
Yep, it sure does. Well, thank you, Mike, for taking my call.
Pleasure's mine.
Have a good night, dear.
You too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for calling. Always a pleasure, Vicki. Have a fantastic one. Tell Adana I said hello.
Will do. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Take care. There you go. What do you think? Talking about entanglement now. Talking about where do lost souls go if they pass in space. I think Vicki may have it right. And again, I think this is an interesting thing to think about, interesting concepts, and that's why we do it. 702-957-1037. We're into Skinwalker Ranch and the Hitchhiker Effect. Do you think it's related? Do you think this soul sort of thing in quantum entanglement actually tracks somehow? Or do you think, again, damn it, Michael Strange, now you've gone too far. We are just stretching this into things that make no damn sense. Love to hear your thoughts. You know the number. troubledminds.org. Click the Discord link. Let's go to APOC in Oklahoma. You're on Troubled Minds. Welcome. How are you tonight?
So I'm going to try to put this all together, but I agree with Vicki in that I do think that we all go back to love, and I think love is the source. We can call God love, and I think it works. But so if if the particles don't go slower than the speed of light, they would almost sort of be defined as a signal. Would that be an okay representation in this scenario, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. And that's you are a science fiction fan as well, and that's how they use it in sci-fi. They use that idea of subspace and tachyons as a way to communicate. So I think it may be, let's say, maybe even the purest signal. But yeah, go ahead. Great thought.
So if they're a signal, and if energy is disrupted in space, if we're separated from our body in relationship to the dying in space thing, what if, again, with the hitchhiker scenario, it could encapsulate or capture the information or base of what the soul is, and move it, like James was saying, to the source, basically, or going back in time, or going to, where do tachyon particles go? I don't know. Do they continue moving, and do they always potentially go back to the source if it's a loop, basically? But in chat, I was in the very beginning of the show. What was the name of the first caller?
Oops, muted myself. Nick. Sorry.
Nick. I like Nick a lot. He had some good points, and it sort of inspired some thoughts. So if you go into sort of the entangled particles thing, I think naturally we have some entanglements. Naturally, we have this sort of geometry, and we're naturally entangled in certain ways, and I think that's part of how things work. What I mentioned in chat, which you caught the last half of, I think, was that if potentially we have natural entanglements, could there be a usage for a divisive sort of usage for tachyons or psychology or commercials or gaslighting or whatever, and sort of disrupting the entanglement via creating the way I see it in this scenario is you have tachyon particles encapsulating one node of the geometry, one entangled particle, pulling it away from the source of the whole or the natural entanglement, and disrupting that story, disrupting that piece. And so I was contemplating that in the very beginning when the show started, thanks to Nick, and then some other people kind of chimed in. But I know this is really scattered, but it's something I've been contemplating lately in different ways. If there are disruptions that happen, where is it intended to disrupt the whole entanglement in just disrupting one, so to speak? I know that went in a weird way, but what do you think?
No. This whole thing's a little bit disjointed because, like I said, we throw a couple concepts in a blender, and sometimes it comes out weird, and that's okay. I mean, that's why we do this. How about this? What if you have like entanglement, sort of that hitchhiker effect, of a soul to something else, and the soul dips into the subspace? Does the entanglement persist, or do the tachyons sort of wipe that connection?
Good question. So if I think so. Are tachyons always only in space? Because I think that they go through the Earth as well.
Two different things. So tachyon. So we were talking about tachyons and the neutrino. So a neutrino is an invisible thing that it does go through the Earth. The tachyon is like that subspace thing where it's basically dimensional non-particles that are moving faster and stuck into a faster than speed of light cycle. So they are two different things. One was a ghost particle. The other is sort of like a subspace, again, sci-fi theoretical thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Interesting. So yeah, if that is true, and if they're in space and someone does pass away in space, sure, I think that potentially it could it could sort of capture. I go back to the guy's research where he weighed bodies, and they ended up having an actual weight when they died, and he could measure that. And of course, more research needs to be done, which hasn't been done yet. But if that's true, then the energy that releases from us when we die is actually, it has mass. And if it has mass, it has information, viable information, active information, versus the singularity or the core concept of information without time. So if it has active information, if the tachyons can actually pick that up, then potentially it can, take it to different places, maybe. But how does it drop it off? I'm channeling Daryl here. How would it drop it off? Where would it continue to be attached to the tachyon particles, or would it actually land someplace? Especially if it doesn't interact with planetary bodies, if it's just a spatial thing. If it did interact with other planetary bodies, then I would say maybe it could land on Earth or land on another planet. But again, does it continue to stay attached? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
interesting.
It is some wild thoughts, which is again what we do here. The idea is to have some wild thoughts and try and fumble with our words and figure out at least rough concepts of what maybe may actually be. Fantastic stuff, APOC. You were the best. What else you got? I got a couple more minutes for you if you got extra stuff. If not, we got Robert on the phone behind you. So let's share the love. So you're cool. What else you got?
Yeah, just to say I've been fumbling with words for the last few days now, and it's fine. It's okay. So I'm handing it over to Robert because I'd love for him to get in and say what he wants to say.
Appreciate it very much. APOC here, a good friend of mine, a good friend of the show. She's got a podcast called Apocalypse Tau. Check it out. Links in the description down below. She's got all kinds of social media. Is a prolific Twitterer. Follow her on Twitter and come say hi. Come meet her on the Discord. Very, very fine young lady and nicer than she seems because I always cut her off on the show. Come say hi. Come meet her on the Discord. Troubleminds.org. Click the Discord link. Appreciate it very much, APOC. Let's do it. 702-957-1037. Still talking about this. Space Ghost, the Warp Ghost, Tachyons, Subspace Souls. Let's go to Robert in Pennsylvania. Robert, you're on Troubled Minds. Take us home, man. Got a few minutes for you, about 5-6 minutes. Go right ahead.
Well, I just want to hitchhike on what Vicky was talking about. I'm hearing myself through the phone. I just want to hitchhike on what Vicky was saying. A couple of years ago, my sister
words and trip over concepts and kind of think things through as we talk about them, as we consider them together. So that's what it's all about. That's literally what these conversations are. It's literally why I started the entire show. It's because we just don't, as people, we don't talk to each other like we should, in my opinion, in terms of, let's say, just kind of communication without judgment, communication without fear of being wrong or ridiculed, and just thinking about larger concepts. And like I say, we're all stuck in the gutter. This is a quote from somebody, I can't remember exactly who. We're all stuck in the gutter, but some of us are staring at the stars. And that's it. And that's the way this goes. So if you're into the show and you want to help out, there are a number of ways you can do that. We have a Troubled Minds merch. You can find it at troubledfans.com. If you want to help the show in other ways, you can sub up on Patreon or Rockfin. Those are probably the best two ways. Twitch, you can sub up on. They take 50%, so don't do that unless there's no other way for you. If you want to help the show and you don't want to spend money, I get it, or don't have money to spend, you can help by just spreading the word. Let people know there's a conversation happening Monday through Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific. And there we go. And also listen to the podcast feed. It's monetized. And if you listen to an old episode, there are currently 447 episodes on the podcast feed. So if you're just finding Troubled Minds, you are missing out. There's a ton of great conversations, ton of great topics on there. And as we finish, it goes exactly like this. Be sure, be strong, be true. Thank you for listening. From our Troubled Minds to yours, have a great night.